know if I'm gonna have to.
Gloria, do you happen to know if Jim and Tyler are coming?
Jim will not be here and I didn't get a hold of Tyler yet.
Okay, I think it might be safe to assume that Tyler might not be able to make it.
Yeah, I think that's a safe assumption.
Okay. In that case, we have everyone we expect.
And I don't have video for you all yet.
Okay, we'll work on that.
Okay.
We're alive. We're gonna get it. We're alive.
We need to turn the video on.
I just made a fast and furious
Cool.
trip to the doctor. For the girls, check. Yes.
All right, for those who'd like to see the pledge of allegiance, let's go ahead and do that.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United
States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, good evening, everybody. I guess we have to wait one more second for Jordan to return. We're not expecting Jim this evening, and we're assuming that Tyler's also going to miss tonight for the search and rescue that's ongoing. But Jordan should be back momentarily. All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome to a regular meeting of the Silverton Board of Trustees. It's July 25th, 2022. The time is 7:03 p.m. and I call this meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Jeff Harris.
Yes.
Trustee Crater.
Here.
Trustee Harper, not here. Trustee Bureau.
Here.
Trustee George is not here. Mayor Pro Tem Barney.
Here.
Here. Right, this evening, do we have any staff or board revisions to tonight's agenda?
I do not.
Wonderful, thank you. All right, at this time, we'll now open up public comment. We'll start with in-person comment, then we'll move to Zoom comments. Please introduce yourself, and then everyone will be given 3 minutes.
Hi, I'm Gigi Rain. I sent part of this in an email to you all last week, but I'm speaking tonight to have it put on the record. It has come to our attention that tonight the town trustees and mayor are voting on proposed accommodations by resolution so that Mayor Pro Tem Barney can reside out of the country for a year and still participate via Zoom as a trustee. There's a big difference between a town resolution and the town municipal code. This group of trustees under the leadership of Mayor Furman has been pretty liberal in its interpretation of when and when not to grant waivers or exceptions to town resolutions when they support this board's agenda. An ordinance is more formal and authoritative than a resolution. Ordinances cannot be granted exceptions by resolution or executive order. According to Municipal Code Section 1-3-240, no ordinance shall be passed finally on the date it is introduced. An ordinance shall be introduced and read at one regular meeting of the Board of Trustees. If the ordinance receives the required vote on its second reading, it shall be duly adopted and shall take effect as set forth in Section 1-3-250 after publication and a 30-day waiting period. To overturn an ordinance, the town trustees need to amend or repeal the ordinance with the same formalities with which the original ordinance was adopted. According to Municipal Code Section 1-1-80, these laws are not meant to be taken lightly. According to Municipal Code Section 1-3-110, any person who alters, changes, or amends this code except in the manner prescribed in this article, or who alters or tampers with this code in any matter so as to cause the ordinances of the town to be misrepresented thereby, shall upon conviction thereof be punished as provided in Section 1-4-20 of this chapter, i.e. this is a misdemeanor. The actual municipal code was written for a reason. This is the community's town. You don't just get to change laws as you see fit. There are protocols that need to be adhered to. You can't govern by executive orders and resolutions as you see fit. You need to follow the laws. Most of our town has no idea what this board is doing behind their backs. According to Municipal Code Section 2-2-10B, each trustee shall be a resident of the town and a qualified elector therein. If any trustee moves from or becomes during the term of his or her office a non-resident of the town, he shall be deemed thereby to have vacated his or her office upon the adoption by the Board of Trustees of a resolution declaring such vacancy. In addition, Section 2-2-50 states in part, when an elective officer ceases to reside within the limits of the town, it shall be deemed grounds for removal from office. This cannot be just another town attorney declaration that the board can adopt a special resolution nullifying the intent of the current municipal code. That is illegal, and you cannot just change, amend, or make exceptions to the municipal codes to meet your agenda.
Thank you.
My name is Bruce Rain. Continuing. Colorado state law states the same requirements. CRS 31-4-102 states, if the mayor during the term of his office removes from or becomes a non-resident of the ward in which he was elected, he shall be deemed thereby to vacate his office, effective upon the adoption by the city council of a resolution declaring such. CRS section 31-4-106 states the same requirements for councilmen. In the past, Mayor George Mason lived in the county and had to rent an apartment here in the Benson so that he resided in town during his term as mayor. In addition, Mayor Pro Tem Secco owned the Wyman, but moved to and lived in Arizona. Even though he owned property here in town, he was asked to give up his elected position. We now have a mayor who at best resides approximately a quarter of the year in Silverton and spends the rest of his time at his house in Durango. Mayor Furman, the town citizens are not dumb. They do not fall for the fact that you are living in town just because you park your old car in front of your Silverton property. Now we have a mayor pro tem who wants to reside out of the country for a year and still keep her position as trustee. Right now, she claims she will be gone for a year, but who is to say that won't become 2 years or more? How can trustees and a mayor who don't or won't reside in town truly have a vested interest in the welfare of the town of Silverton? The answer is simple. They can't and they don't. Both Mayor Furman's position and Trustee Barney's position should be reviewed by this board and deemed grounds for removal due to residency. There is a big difference between the word residence, as in owning a residence, and reside, as in residing in the town. Look it up. Reside, to live permanently and continuously somewhere. Just because Zoom meetings have become a thing during COVID, this does not change the intent behind why elected officials are required to reside in town. When you reside in town, you take pride in town events and accomplishments. You are here to make critical decisions in an emergency. You have constant interactions with town residents. You know the issues that are important to voters. You don't have to rely on your friends to keep you up to speed as to what is happening in town. When you reside elsewhere, your priorities change. Case in point, how many town events do you see Mayor Furman at? I would hope none of you are so arrogant that you do not believe there are plenty of people in town who could fill your position and do a great job. I have here to give to the board the signatures of local voters quickly obtained who have read this statement and support what I'm saying.
Sorry. Thank you.
Hi, Charlie Monsalve. I know I have no say in this, but we would all appreciate if Mayor Furman and Mayor Pro Tem Barney would recuse themselves from any vote regarding this issue. since it directly affects their elected positions on this town board. What do you want me to do? The signatures? That it? Thank you.
I'm Gilbert Archuleta. I'm here to state that I feel that trying to change the town code to state that you could do everything from abroad is wrong. It's been proven, the code was written years ago to protect this community and to protect all the communities. It's in every municipality that when you run for the seat and you get elected, then you are there. Once you decide you have to leave for whatever purposes it are, then you resign from your position. If we allow this to happen, this change is going to happen again and again, over and over. Basically, what I feel is coming from the board is maybe you feel that there's not enough qualified people in Silverton to be able to sit at that table. It's sending the wrong message to the people of this community. The code was written. Anybody who ran for the position knew what was in that code. And to say we're going to change it midstream or at any time, I think it's something that should be, if it's considered, should be considered way before this happens. And there's a process to go through. It should be, the old code should be abandoned, the new code should be brought up. It should be a public hearing, a first reading, a second reading, and the publication of it. It's a process that's happened here. It was stated before, there's been a precedent set where two people were asked to leave the board if they couldn't comply with the town code. So myself and others in this town are asking that you guys consider keeping the code intact to make things work as smoothly as we can in the town of Silverton. Thank you for your time.
Okay, Molly Barella. I concur with both of the statements made by Gigi Bruce and Charlie, as well as what's already been said by Chief Archuleta. So the word reside is a place of living. Okay, but to be that, you have to, let's see, what does this say? To be present as an element or a quality, to be vested as a right, a permanent dwelling or continuously occupied domicile. That's what to reside means. A resident just means you have a place to live in. So there's a big difference. So quantifying the potential code, that's for when you went on vacation to go see your brother in California. That's for when you left for a little bit of time to go see your family and to spend time in other places. That's for Gloria to be in her office because other people in this community have been sick and she's got an autoimmune issue that she can't be in the same room. That's what this is for. If you're actually looking at changing the code, it needs to be very, very specific for why. It's for the time that my very last meeting as a trustee member, I was not sitting in this room because my contractor at my house in Arizona, which I very, very vocally talked about, he changed the dates on me by 2 days. I could have driven back. I had 2 vehicles, but I chose to do Zoom because that is the way a remote work policy should be done. It's for small nuances in our lives. It's for the reason Jess got to stay home with his wife and his brand new baby. It is not for taking a year sabbatical, regardless of whether or not you deserve it and you need it because you've taught for 20 years or whether you're residing part-time in another community. I was residing part-time in another community for the very last month I was on this board. Y'all could have told me I could go away because that's the rules. So you don't get to change the rules just because you want to accommodate yourselves. That is against the law. What did she say? It's a misdemeanor if you change it just to be something for yourself. Now, on other notes, I completely support 100% the gunfighters coming back to this community. And I'm very happy to see a multi-year contract for Hard Rockers. These are things that are the basis of this community that give us our sense of purpose and being, which also means that they are vested, which is what you have to be on this board. That's what you ran for. That's why you live here. You're here to do something for the community. If you can't listen to every voice, I will not tell you how many come to see me still at my door every day, and I'm not on this board anymore.
My name's Dave Zanoni, not quite a lifelong resident. I sat in that chair for 8 years. You know how many meetings I missed? Anybody want to take a guess? 1. Because I was sick. So if any of you think this is a hobby, you better get your butt out of this building. This is not a hobby. This is a dedication. I got a lot of blood, sweat, and tears and sweat of my ass in that seat. And I personally take it as I'm offended. You guys act like this is I'm trying to bite my tongue here, folks. This is not a hobby. It's a dedication. And if you can't dedicate the time, I totally understand. Get the hell out. The door works both ways, swings both ways. If you can't make the meeting, Sally, I'm sorry for your situation. But you need to step down, be a woman and step down. Shane, same with you. If you can't call your residents over here on 14th and Reese, not Durango, Colorado, or New York City or wherever, you need to step down. You need to go home. You need to be dedicated to sit your butt in that chair. If you can't be dedicated, goodbye. Because I'm personally insulted. And I know a hell of a lot more people that set their butt in that chair just like I did. And the crap that's trying to be pulled is insulting. So what Gigi and Bruce had brought up and Molly touched on, I chalk my vote up. Get dedicated or get out.
Any other public comment? Moving to Zoom Yes, no? Moving to Zoom comments, if you click the raise hand button, we'll promote you to panelist. Seeing none, we'll go ahead and close the opening public comment period, and we will move on to our agenda for the evening. First item on our agenda tonight is new business 4A, consideration to approve the Gunfighters Association special event application.
And we do have Nate Smith here to answer any questions about the Gunfighters application. There was a slight amendment made. We are going to add an additional date on September 4th, a Saturday. Before this Gunfighters Association, we'll have another performance from another group working with Nate and his group.
Can I ask a question, Clayton, real quick? If I'm recusing because I am in the Gunfighters Association, should I step out? I could go change into my costume, but I thought that'd be a little over the top.
Is there, if you directly support do you have, I guess you're claiming recusal based on a personal interest?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, then, the best, course of action and best practice is if you're going to recuse yourself is yes, to step out so that you don't influence anybody else's decision.
Okay, I won't influence anybody.
We do still have 4 trustees, so we do still have a quorum without David. Would you like to say anything about the application before we just discuss, sir?
I'm sorry for it being so last minute. Next time it will be in the winter or far more ahead of time.
It's great to have it back.
I'm happy to do it.
And a quick overview, the performances will be held every Friday and Saturday. This weekend, all the way through September 4th on 12th Street, the train tracks. And they're also using the space Tiffany Decade's property right beside the Shady. And as I mentioned, this is a recurring event. And this year is a little different. Nate has submitted a letter regarding the what the association will be doing for. I can't think of
Gun violence.
Thank you. And also the neighbor support as well.
Thanks for taking that into consideration.
Oh, yeah.
And thank you for the statement as well.
Yeah, I was already kind of worried about it, as I said in the letter that I sent. So I'm happy to include that at the top of every performance.
So motions in this meeting are going to be on three people's shoulders. So don't hold back if you're excited to make a motion here.
I'll make a motion to conditionally approve the Silverton Gunfighters Association special event application pending the receipt of the updated insurance and medical plan.
I'll second.
Give it to Jeff. All right, thank you. Roll call, please.
Trustee Davis, recuse yourself. Yeah. Trustee Davis. Yeah. Yes. Trustee Craig, recuse yourself. Trustee Harper's not here. Trustee Ehrman.
Yeah.
Trustee George is not here. Mayor Pro Tem Barney
Yes.
and Mayor Furman.
Yes.
And that passes with everyone present.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Look forward to it. Dana, you're good.
Didn't bring my costume.
I thought you were changing.
It's a lot of buttons and a lot of petticoats, and Rebecca Pertot does great work.
So now we'll move on to, it did pass unanimously for who's here.
Great. Come show up, right?
Moving on to new business 4B, consideration to contract the Resource X with Resource X for priority-based budgeting and budget timeline.
So I'm really excited to announce a priority-based budgeting opportunity to help us organize our budget and communicate this important policy document to the community. I mentioned that this is something that I would like to strive for in my administrator goals, and the previous board approved those goals. We are starting a participatory budget process in 2021 with the proposed citizen engagement opportunities, and this will include town hall open house with a state of the town presentation and master plan projects that citizens will be able to vote on as a tool for the trustees to make their budgeting decisions. But so the next step in this is Resource X. It's a software company that facilitates program or priority-based budgeting. We call it PBB. This company helps break down the budget into programs. So instead of having line items for postage, a community member can see that postage is, for example, 20% of the program expenditures for utilities. So it's a lot easier to identify efficiencies in programs than line items that state we spend $2,792 on postage. Resource X is trying to attract and work with smaller communities and has started this cohort program. Since this is the first program of its kind, Resource X is offering 50% discount for 10 small communities, and that's nationwide. So these communities will form a cohort and reduce the burden of training. That is why there is a discount. It'll also allow for networking, group thinking through issues that might come up in our budgeting process. And then our price will be locked in at that discounted rate for future years. I don't know who is in the cohort yet. They have until the 31st of this month to sign on. But in my initial ask, it was Eaton, Colorado was interested, and there are others located in Wisconsin, including Milton, Ripon, and Winnicombe. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right. And then the Finance Committee has reviewed this program at their last meeting, if anyone would like to speak further on this.
Does everyone understand what priority-based budgeting is? Because I've read the memo and it still would be helpful for maybe like a layperson explanation of how this is different than what we've done before.
Sure. So in your packet, I did provide a little breakdown of it, but basically I'm going to try and go late. We have our traditional line item budgets, and it is really difficult to find efficiencies in a traditional line item budget when you're just going what we budgeted last year in that line item and what we do next year. What this does is it takes our line item budget and it separates them out into these different programs. So now we have programs like water and sewer. So let's look at our utility program and how we can create efficiencies within our utility program. And so it kind of breaks it out. So and I'll say like Kendall ski lift or Kendall skiing program. And then we can break that out as well. So it gives us this opportunity to really organize our line item budget, which we'll have to keep anyways. It's not like we're getting rid of our line item budget. And then it takes these programs so that it's a lot easier for the community to digest and be able to really see where we spend like a percentage of our postage. For example, I'm just using postage because that's easy. Instead of just seeing a line item for postage, you realize that, well, we have, 20% of our whole budget is in postage in this one program. How can we reduce that? Does that help a little bit?
That's perfect. That's awesome. Very, very helpful. Thank you. The trustees, any questions, discussion?
Or you are.
Yeah, I just want to add from the finance committee, Gloria presented this to us. And I think a big question for us was, well, let me just say it first. We were very on board with anything that staff felt like would help them do budgeting better and help us align our priorities and our budgeting. And anything that would help the staff feel like it was more organized and would bring efficiencies just in day-to-day financial management of the town. But we also were concerned with Matt and Gloria's time in being able to take on this kind of new implementation of a new process. And, I think Gloria expressed in this, and Gloria, I won't totally speak for you, but just, this idea that we thought we could move towards priority-based budgeting in the future, but we didn't necessarily know we'd do it on such an accelerated timeline. But then really the appeal of this opportunity seemed pretty convincing that we were getting this opportunity to be a part of a cohort and get a lot of hands-on training and mentoring in this space to get access to this software in the system for half price, locked in, basically. So I think that was appealing. And so the finance committee really kind of pressed staff to say, if you guys are excited about this and you feel like this is really the direction you would go and it would help us to achieve our goals, the finance committee felt very supportive of it, but we really wanted a gut check on whether that added time commitment was going to be feasible. So Gloria and Matt, you guys, or if any trustees have comments on, that was the summary of our discussion of it.
Yeah, and I honestly wanted you all to talk me out of it, but as we talked about it, Matt and I got more and more excited, and we were like, well, actually, this would be a great tool, especially this year, to help us organize for next year so we can present it as program-based in the 2023 budget. So it is quite a commitment, and it will take Matt and I some time to integrate it into our systems, but we already know that it will fit with Cassell, which is our current system that we use. So that was a huge plus, but we're hoping that this is a great opportunity for us to really organize our budget and present it in a very palatable way.
And they got very excited. That's just what I want to say is Matt and Gloria got very excited. And so when two people on staff get really excited about a budgeting tool, that's probably a good sign yeah.
So as a tool, you see it working in kind of like two different levels. One is this practical level behind the scenes for you guys, where you are using it to input what we're currently doing from the line item style And then being able to manipulate and view that data in in the way that you currently do with the Excel spreadsheet, but in a more,
Robust or.
yeah, like built out way. And then with that data that's input into the software system, being able to present it in a more user-friendly way to the public. So the public isn't necessarily analyzing a spreadsheet the way that they typically have. So the public would see something different than they're used to seeing, but it would be the same information that's been transferred from the Excel spreadsheet into the new software program.
Yes, it was still based off of a, when you get down to the nitty gritty, it'd still be your general ledger line item with the generally accepted accounting principles.
Sure, there's that level of it that exists.
Just on a higher level, there is the more user friendly view.
So more pie charts and.
Yes.
Right? We
Yeah,
love
a lot
those.
more pie charts, a lot more percentages, and it is going to take some work to organize all of that, but I think that work will be well utilized in the future, especially in the organization portion of it. And we do get excited about the fact that it is a networking opportunity for us to kind of troubleshoot with other organizations as we go through this process. I really like that supportive aspect of this program.
And so when you say creating efficiencies, sorry, I'm just going to ask a quick follow-up question. When you say that you're creating efficiencies with this tool, it's potentially like a big front-loading process. So that isn't necessarily super efficient on the front end, but it leads to efficiencies in the actual budgeting process. And also you mean efficiency in analyzing what we're spending money on and being better at reducing spending in one area and adding spending to another area as you become more analytical with what we're doing.
Right, that is correct. And then the next step of this too will be a citizen engagement component next year that will look similar to what we're doing this year, but have a lot more tools at our disposal for analyzing that data and being able to present for those priorities from the community.
I have one other thing.
Go for it.
So when something comes with a staff recommendation like this and so much enthusiasm, I'm totally happy to be gung ho. And as a teacher, I've also been in the position of when we experiment with a new curriculum planner designer or a new, some kind of tool that's meant to be really efficient and useful. And it sometimes is really awesome and it does create efficiencies for us. And sometimes we age out of it or it goes away. We've done this with some report card software programs and things that I'm just wanting to be cautious, I guess. So I want to ask the question and pose it should the program start to move and shift in a way that doesn't fit with this uniqueness of Silverton anymore? Is there a efficient way to pivot out of it so that we're not stuck using something that doesn't fit the unique needs anymore?
Yeah, so it wouldn't be like we would be locked in that program and all our information would be in the program and then we'd have to pull it all out. We would still have a traditional line item budget available if we wanted to just stop this process.
Okay, great, thank you.
I think in the finance committee, we also talked a little bit about transparency, and the discussion was really how this can bring more transparency to the community because it makes the budget more user-friendly to view, our spending more user-friendly to view. And so again, if someone really wants to geek out on line item budgeting, it's still there. There's nothing being, switched around or hidden, but just that it makes it much more accessible and transparent to our community about, are we aligning our spending with what we as a community say our goals are? And I think that's an appeal as we move into the final master planning phase and we have our trustee goals for several years, that there's more ability to align all of those things with what we spend our money on.
Jordan or Jeff, any questions or thoughts?
My only question was, Sally got to you already about kind of aging out of the software potentially, but I saw Patrick Rondinelli also has support behind this too, which is great to see. So I would say I'm just generally supportive of it.
Yeah, first of all, sorry I can't be there tonight. I have COVID. Make that known. My first question was where the value, the $10,000 year value came from, and that question has been answered. And then Gloria just confirmed it's not a double entry. It will work simultaneously with our current programs, and then with the giving the information to the public, is it a program that the public will have access to, or we'll just be able to pull things from to give better information to the public?
So there's a couple different ways we can do that. We can pull the information and present it to the public. And then there's other ways where you can actually integrate it with your website so that people can kind of go on and explore your budget.
Well, it sounds like all the questions that we have been answered. Would someone like to make a motion?
So do we make a motion on this one or do we just give?
Or staff direction? Sorry. So it sounds like the board is in support of providing direction to pursue the cohort program with Resource X. Any objections to that? Awesome.
Not for me.
Good luck.
Yeah. Have fun.
Thank you. I'll keep you guys apprised on how it's going.
All right. Next agenda item, new business 4C, consideration to approve updates to the employee handbook.
And so since the adoption of the employee handbook in February, we have identified a couple of typos and issues that need to be addressed. These are outlined in your memo, including short-term disability definitions and expense reimbursement. We didn't have a kind of parameters around the expense reimbursement before, and then I can answer any questions you might have related to this.
With expense reimbursement, Gloria, working for the state with kind of on a county by county per diem. I've noticed you've gone with a flat rate and flat rate for night and for lodging and meals. Could you expand on that a little bit?
Sure, we did that. I had Melina do some research on other policies in the area, and that was the fairest policy that we found. Prior to the adoption, or when we first adopted this, we didn't have any parameters in there as far as how much you got reimbursed in an expense. So actually, when I went to my CCCMA conference and came back and realized, oh, you guys, we don't have this framework in place yet. So that's why we did a little update on here.
I just had a question kind of going back to our discussion about family leave from last time. Just trying to clarify, I think as I was reading through, well, let me put it this way. When we talked about family leave last time and opting out of the state program, we talked about our leave being related to short-term disability in the handbook. But then I was also wanting to make sure that the family leave is covered. You know, if you have something like paternity leave, you don't exactly get a doctor's note for short-term disability to go on paternity leave. So just clarifying that we have both short-term disability and family leave for staff.
So family or short-term disability encompasses family leave as well. So when we were kind of shopping around for a good short-term disability plan, that was one thing that we had in mind was parental leave.
Great, thank you.
Who wants it?
And I can make a motion to approve the updates made to the employee handbook and personnel manual.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Trustee Davis,
Yes.
trustee Cranker,
Yes.
trustee Harper is absent. Trustee Graham,
Yes.
trustee George is absent. Mayor Pro Tem Barney,
Yes.
Mayor Carter.
Yes.
Motion passes with all present.
Thank you. All right, now we move on to item 5 of our agenda, approval of the consent agenda items. I think before voting on that, it would be helpful to have Clayton well, it looks like Gloria wants to say something first. I was just gonna say have Clayton update us on what was changed in our doctor contract.
Yeah, so I just want to just highlight a couple items in here. First of all, our financials, our reporting system in Excel is getting more accurate, but there are still several outstanding issues with the financials presented in your packet. The finance committee, Matt and myself, are all working on getting these issues resolved. But if you have any specific questions, it's more about how they're getting coded, how things are getting coded right now. And so we're working through that. But if you have more specific questions, you can always opt to pull an item from the consent agenda and we can talk about that more. And then you'll also notice the Hard Rockers special event contract, and Clayton is here. We did add language regarding terms and insurance. And then I put this in the consent agenda because you had already approved the actual event. We just needed to do some massaging to the contract. And then also there was a typo on resolution 2022-14. Thank you, trustee Cranker, for pointing that one out. The second whereas statement should state that Mullis Lake Park and Campground is located 5.9 miles south of town boundary instead of how it is currently printed. And I would ask, if approved, the motion include this edit. Okay.
Thank you.
Clayton, did you want to highlight the language that you added in the special events contract?
Sure. You know, I don't have the red line in front of me. There was some conversation regarding the previous draft, and I had made some comments about making sure the insurance was correct, that we had a better liability waiver in the contract. Let me see. So I updated the insurance paragraph 10 to reflect the most updated version, the most updated minimum amount of liability coverage under the CGIA. And I also added the language that we discussed as from time to time amended, whichever is higher, so that we wouldn't have to, keep going back and doing this, although the Colorado legislature might change it or they might not. At least the language is in there. So in case we miss something, this can still be used as a good template. I significantly updated paragraph 12, the indemnification and release paragraph as discussed. And also limitations on liability and force majeure were added and updated to give the town a little bit more cushion from any liability exposure. Mayor Furman had added a comment regarding termination and default, and the fact that we didn't have anything in the contract, and that was added in paragraph 15, and also gives the right of the town to terminate the agreement without cause. Just making sure they give the event people enough notice that it doesn't affect them. So right now, as it's written, it says 30 days. Of course, that's subject to your approval and or change if you wanted to amend or otherwise change that part of the contract. Let's see. I added some general paragraphs under 20, including counterparts and electronic signatures, a Tabor clause, and And I'm sure there's a couple little things, but I think I touched on the major substantive changes that we discussed in the meeting. Subject to your questions. Oh, the term too, we added an annual term and say that will renew annually unless terminated. So unless you terminate by December 31st, excuse me, November 30th of the previous year, then it would renew annually. So that also helps with Tabor and annual appropriations.
But I just want to clarify that termination isn't 30 days at any time. It's 30 days from the renewal date. So it still would happen on the like contract anniversary date. Now, like we couldn't terminate 30 days prior to the event or something like that. So it seems like that notice provision makes sense.
Yeah, you could terminate 30 days prior if you gave notice. Just as an example, I mean, you can make that whatever you want. It's pretty typical to have roughly a 30-day notification, Mayor Furman, based on, you know, just the way these events happen and how much kind of time and energy goes into preparing for them. You know, I know that Silverton has been very empathetic towards a special event persons that organize these things and understand the time and energy and effort that goes into them. And so that seemed like a prudent notification period so that, you know, we weren't canceling events the week before and leaving people kind of, you know, with a lot of time and money and resources into something that wasn't going to happen.
Got it. So I missed 30 days at any time.
That's correct.
And that's typical.
I mean, it's very common. You can make it whatever you want, but yes, I think 30 days is pretty typical for, especially for a no, you know, at will termination. So, and that's also typical for a town to be able to terminate an event without having to cite cause. And you can, of course, that's just some basic kind of template language. And as the board, you guys can change it however you see fit if you don't like it.
And since it's my suggestion, I feel compelled to make a suggestion, which is, I think maybe it should be just a little longer. I don't think this board would terminate right away, like with no notice, but I feel like we should give them more than 30 days notice if we're going to terminate. Like 60 days. But like Clayton said, it sounds like it could be whatever
Yeah.
the board decides is reasonable.
It seems like something reasonable so that if they had contracts with vendors or other people that you're not just leaving them in a lurch.
In marketing materials.
Yeah.
So do we want to change it to 60 days?
Oh, if I could, regarding marketing materials, most events do start marketing.
Way before that.
Yeah, like a year. Uh-huh.
And I think we all think it's unlikely that this would ever get terminated. We just wanted to make sure that if something crazy happened, that the town had the ability. Do you want to say 60 days?
60 days is good. It's, yeah.
More generous to them.
Mm-hmm.
So then at whatever point we get to a point of approving the consent agenda, it'd be subject to that revision to the Mullis Lake resolution and also this revision to the Hard Rocker holiday contract.
I missed the Mullis Lake.
I was just removing the word not.
It said it's not located 5.9 miles out of town.
Yeah, good catch. Good catch. I'm missing it again. Dana, do you want to make this motion?
Okay, I'm gonna work on it.
Yeah, okay.
Hold on.
Take your time.
All right. We'll see if this first passes. Okay, I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda with the change made to the Mullis Park Campground fire restrictions to remove the word not from not located within 5.9 miles of the town, and a revision to the Hard Rocker Holiday special event contract that allows for 60-day notice for termination of the contract.
Second.
Trustee.
Yes.
Trustee Craig.
Yes.
Trustee Parker is absent. Trustee Aaron. Trustee Doherty is absent. Mayor Pro Tem Barber.
Yes.
Mayor Kirby.
Yes,
Meeting passed by all present.
thank you. Staff reports.
That mute button, okay. All right, so I'm excited to announce that our community development coordinator, Lucy, will be going full-time with the town starting in September. So she is our local intermediary between the town and our current consultants, and will be working on long-term projects while facilitating applications. We have also hired a housing coordinator funded by the 1271 grant. It is Anthony Edwards. He officially starts August 1st, and we are setting him up with a housing@silverton.co.us email and phone extension. He will be working on the build out of 10 townhomes, the finalization of the purchase of the Zanoni property, and the annexation of Anvil into the town. This is grant funded for 2 years. Kendall lift station is fixed after 7 months of waiting for a part on the order. And thank you for John's crew and Chris Higgins for manually pumping. And I think even Nathan was in on that too, manually pumping it for the last 7 months. The audit will not be complete by July 31st, and we will be filing for an extension to September 30th. This year's been a challenge with staff changes, or I should say 2021 was a challenge with staff changes, bank changes, and the new auditor we have this year. But it's also been a great opportunity to refine our processes for future years. So after meeting with the auditor today, we hope to have a draft to you all by mid-August. I think that is all of my staff reports. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Great news, building out staff.
And capacity.
Those 2 positions will help me immensely.
Yeah, that's a big deal. Oh, on a side note, on the memos, the way that you're coding the item on our agenda as it relates back to the trustee goals is awesome, even in color.
Sorry, that's how they're color coded on my wall, so I just like to.
It's beautiful.
Color coding.
Okay.
Great. Committee reports.
All right, we can go first on this one.
Cool.
On the 15th, we had Facilities, Parks and Rec Committee meeting. You want to catch all the hot takes, you can watch it on YouTube, but kind of gave some clarity to the DHM discussion we had at our previous board meeting. And then we talked about the potential of Rowing Dome grant for seniors and how that's a really awesome opportunity, and we just need to figure out a place to put it is the challenge, which is kind of a reoccurring challenge of this meeting. We also discussed other things over at Kendall. So kind of what the future of the Kendall deck might look like. And also what you brought up before, just the chairlift maintenance and waiting on that piece. And then the other kind of things was potential donation of skate park equipment. And again, kind of awesome opportunity. We don't know where to put it yet. Gonna work on that. And then some different options to kind of approach the baseball field. still kind of no clear direction on that, but. Yeah, if I missed anything, feel free to add.
Yeah, I would just add the context that they explained why it's so challenging to maintain the baseball field as it is. Many years ago, the irrigation system broke and it'd be very, very expensive to fix it. And so even if we had a community service day where we like graded it and put in new dirt, 1 or 2 rains and it'd be destroyed again. So more brainstorming to be done before we can figure out what the best way to approach the baseball field and track area is. But it's much more complicated than just showing up with shovels, which is what I had in mind when I was like, hey, Todd, get after this. So that was a very helpful bit of context for me.
Some pest control, sanitary issues with its proximity to the treatment site.
Get hit a fly ball into
Well, and birds just dropping things, carrying it over. And so some issues that are sort of recurring until there's no easy Band-Aid for them.
I can go for finance. So as a main thing we talked about was the Resource X and potentially going in that direction. We also talked about the budget timeline. And so Gloria kind of presented what was similar to in our packet. And I think something that she was really excited about, and I think we could get excited about was doing more of a community involved process for budgeting. And so whoever's listening, pay attention. Just a way for the community to be engaged in our budgeting process and to potentially show up at town hall and be a part of a brainstorming session to talk about what are our town priorities for where we should put our money and really get community input on that for the budgeting cycle, which I think is exciting for folks to be able to be involved with. We have great experience from all the master planning. So hopefully if we're talking about spending money, people show up. And then that again kind of relates to priority-based budgeting. It can be part of the process, I think. We talked a little bit more detail about Matt's amazing work with the Department of Revenue related to unfiled and inappropriately requested taxes for Moelis and Kendall. Basically, the Department of Revenue was charging us taxes for Moelis in the winter and Kendall for the summer. And we needed to do a bit of work to rectify that. So Matt was able to catch up on all of that and save us money, which is great.
Thanks.
And then Gloria already mentioned on the audit, they were working through the audit checklist and then now looking like we're filing an extension. So that was the finance committee meeting.
Nice. Gloria, are you able to provide the planning commission meeting update?
Sure. So the planning commission met for a town application as the historic review board. They reviewed it was more the people wanting to replace their roof. And in doing so, going through a process, they realized they would have to put up some kind of a facade to be compliant with our regulations. Lucy did a great job working with the applicant. There were 3 original conditions and a couple more were added afterwards, but that passed. So the applicant's very happy about that. The planning commission did ask that we come up with some criteria and be able to have our own historic review board instead of using the planning commission because they're getting inundated in applications that require historic review board. And so that is something that I will be talking to you guys in our next work session when we talk about, and that's next Monday, our certified local government certification and kind of what that might look like and how that might play into a historic review board as well. And the other application was county, and I don't have a good synopsis for that one. I'm sorry.
All right, thank you very much. Moving on to trustee report. I'll go. I just wanted to highlight the sales tax report that was in the consent agenda. If I'm reading it right, year to date, were up 27.5%. And last year was up 48.68% over 2020. So the town is making a pretty tremendous amount of money compared to before 2020. Although May was down $1,000 relative to the prior year. So it'll be really interesting to see how the June and July numbers turn out, but that's pretty great. The town is definitely healthy as of right now.
I had something, it came up in the chamber meeting, so that's not quite a committee update, but just wanted to open up the discussion for possibility around tackling again the entrance sign outside of town. Multiple people have talked to me about this since before I was trustee and then becoming a trustee. It came up again at the chamber meeting with the chamber board. Just the possibility to do something before the next season passes. Because I think we all just know that it just is very sad, kind of like a broken window in a building that just sits there and looks sad. And I think, related to our goal of wanting to really make progress in some of our existing plans that we already have, if it's possible to pick up the wayfinding plan, not in its entirety, but maybe just say, hey, one sign at the entrance could really be a quick win. I think could potentially go a long way towards some of our more tourism oriented businesses and just our feel as a community. So I just had a thought that it might be something that could kind of bring a bunch of people together. If we kept it simple and went back to our wayfinding plan that we paid for and have great work on, and the chamber kept referencing the wayfinding plan. I think the chamber would be happy to work with us related to that, talk about tourism, but just go back to what we already have in place, have talked about, and see if there's a way we could bid it out or going into budget season. If there's an option to direct staff just to say, hey, could we take this one piece on? We can't probably do all of our signage, but could we take on the very sad sign outside of town?
Nice.
So opening that up for discussion for trustees and staff.
I think I would recommend that we have a work session to talk about it, because this is kind of oscillated between a few different ideas. A few years ago, there was some grant funding available to redo the billboard. And I'm not sure what ended up happening with that grant that resulted in the billboard not getting updated, but there's a huge kind of range of what we could do. Like redoing the billboard is probably relatively affordable. The wayfinding signage, and I'm just doing this from like old recollections anywhere. One of the ideas was like 50,000. Another idea was 100,000. And so the like wayfinding or the entrance monument that's in that plan is pretty significant relative to just updating the billboard. So I feel like a work session to like hash it all out would be cool. And then like, invite the chamber and anybody else who's interested to participate in that. I think that would be really awesome.
I mean, Beth's writing grants like crazy, if there was options to write a grant for something, or just see if there's a way to tackle that and have the discussion around, is it the wayfinding plan longer term solution, or is it a quicker fix? And I guess we would have to answer that question, but to build it into discussion for the next year.
I love that. That's great.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. I'd be open to a work session on that for sure.
I'm happy to arrange on that, and we'll try and track down what happened to that grant.
Thanks, Gloria. Look in some random file somewhere.
I think maybe we just didn't get awarded it, but I don't remember exactly what happened. It's like we got close to getting it. We had a design for the billboard, or the chamber really was running with it, had the design for the billboard, and then something happened right at the end where we didn't get to execute it.
Well, and I'm happy to circle back with Deanne too, to see what other context, or if Deanne and Gloria and I sat down and just found out what the historic context was there, and then we can work session it. If that's a verb.
Yeah, I think the work session also should potentially draw in community involvement, because I know there's been a lot of discussion about whether it's not, like, are we still identifying as a historic Victorian mining town? Or I think the chamber put out like base camp for adventure type language. which a bunch of other communities also use.
Yeah.
Like or is there something
Or
in the
does it
draft
just-
master plan?
Silverton,
Or just
right.
Silverton, yeah.
I mean, if we go with the wayfinding plan, it just says Silverton, and lots of folks that I've talked to that have strong opinions on our identity have expressed very strong support for a sign that just says Silverton.
Totally.
And so I think we may not even need to
9318.
open up. the
Maybe we
can.
tack
Yeah.
9318 on. there.
Silverton 9318 or welcome to Silver. Like, I think that we may not have to open up a whole discussion of our identity to get an updated sign that says,
Yeah.
That definitely sounds nicer.
yes. So I hear where you're staying, Shane, but there's also a can of worms there that we maybe could just strike it with Silverton or something.
I love that.
Yeah. Nathan, yeah.
I would like to add that staff recently purchased 2 new banners to fly over Main Street. The first one is hanging up currently, and we do have one that'll change seasons to winter. That's slightly different than what we currently have. So
My kids really love tracking, notes, by the way. They pay very close attention to as they shift and change.
Awesome.
Cool.
Any other trustee updates? Okay. Continued business, 9A, second reading and consideration to adopt ordinance 2022-02, an ordinance establishing municipal regulations concerning special events within incorporated town limits.
And I have not received any public comment via email or phone during the time it was posted in the standard. This is the second reading of this ordinance. The special event guide that it does refer to is being rewritten at this moment. So we were given direction that we can adopt this ordinance while we are still drafting the guide.
Okay, we'll make a motion to adopt ordinance 2022-02, an ordinance establishing municipal regulations concerning special events within incorporated town limits.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Trustee Davis.
Yes.
Trustee Craig.
Yes.
Trustee Pierman.
Yeah.
Trustee George is absent. Mayor Pro Tem Martin.
Yes.
Mayor Vernon.
Yes,
Motion passes unanimously, all present.
thank you. All right, moving on to continued business 9B, consideration to adopt resolution 2022-13, resolution adopting a remote attendance policy to provide terms and conditions for limited telephone and electronic participation by members of the Board of Trustees at regular and special meetings. And perhaps because of the public comment we received, it might be helpful for Clayton to clarify the intent of this resolution and why we're considering it.
And also, before we start the discussion, I have, I guess, a question similar to Dana's earlier about a recusal and whether I should leave the room. I don't gain financially from this, so my understanding, I guess it would be a personal gain, but if you can just speak to the recusal.
Mayor Pro Tem Barney, there's obviously no financial interest in this. You all are volunteers and put a lot of time and effort into this with, little appreciation. And I don't mean that nobody appreciates you, but it's not as if you're, this is not a get rich quick scheme. I don't even know if you guys have even a small fee that you get for sitting through hours and hours of these meetings. So obviously there's no financial interest here. The idea of a personal interest is something that you would have to weigh. Certainly this kind of came up based on a situation where you would be traveling. And so, it's kind of, as I understand it anyway, and correct me if my assumption is wrong, the impetus of this is we did not have a remote participation policy, and you were going to be traveling. And so it seemed like a good time to adopt something. So, I obviously there's an appearance issue there. And if you really want this to pass because you want to continue on as Mayor Pro Tem in some sort of remote status while you're traveling, and you have a personal interest in it, only you can say whether or not you can be objective in discussing adoption of this. I will say that the substance of this is such that you don't get to decide, even if it's adopted. It's not giving unfettered access to board members to travel and be in remote. The board as a whole has to agree to allow someone to miss based on the reasons stated within the policy. And, those are, I don't know how to get up, would be, travel, illness, family emergency, work obligations, or other special circumstances. And the rest of the board has to determine as a whole whether or not to grant that access to another member. So this isn't giving any one member of the board power to declare that they're going to participate remotely. It has to be an entire board decision. And so insofar that, you claim that there's no personal interest, I don't see harm or damage in it, but also there's an obvious appearance issue. And so, you need to make that decision. My legal determination would be that there's no per se conflict, but there could be a personal conflict or appearance of impropriety, or appearance of conflict issue. And if you feel that way, then you should recuse yourself.
Thanks. I think given the public comment we heard earlier, I'd like to step out for this discussion. But I also want to just contribute two things before I leave.
Well,
So
before you do that,
hold on. Yeah.
I know I wanted to
You
say,
either can recuse and
well,
step
not to
out,
the
or
discussion, but just regarding my own personal,
why don't we do that after?
after it's done. Sure.
yeah, that's a
If
good
it's
idea,
not
Mayor.
Because we don't want that to influence, but I also want to,
Oh, yeah.
say, related to, I think, Clayton's explanation. My view of, despite the interpretation by the community that spoke, my view of this update is that right now we don't have a policy and we've just been allowing remote attendance.
Mhm.
I don't think Jess came to a meeting at all in the last 6 months of his term in person. And we were okay with that, but we didn't have any ground to stand on if we weren't okay with that. What this update does is allows the board to decide on a case-by-case basis whether the board as a whole is okay with someone remote attending. So if anything, this gives us teeth to prevent remote attending, which we don't have today. So I think it actually goes the opposite direction of how it was interpreted by the community.
It doesn't.
So up to you, but please don't contribute if you're gonna recuse.
So I think that the policy is a benefit to the community.
Well, hold up. Are you
It's-
recusing or not recusing? Because as you say these things, that's influencing the conversation.
I'll recuse.
Okay.
Goodbye.
Okay. What do you all think?
I mean, I think you framed it well of this is giving us the option to make the decision if we want to make the decision about remote attendance. It's like you mentioned, there's, so many times and whoever else was in remote attendance over the last year, and that was kind of just generally accepted and agreed upon without having any sort of policy. I feel like it makes sense to have a policy, and by having a policy, that doesn't mean we made a decision. And it feels kind of weird with, Trustee Jim and Tyler aren't here as well. But, obviously we have to have this decision when the entire board is here, how we want to approach the case-by-case basis.
I think I appreciate what you said, Shane, that this is really, like you said, a policy for participating remotely. This policy doesn't really touch on anything in the code related to residency or status of being a registered elector or anything to that regard. It's giving us context and formality to how do we want this board and future members of the board to participate in meetings and this discussion. So it sounded like it was a very significant thing to the community, but I guess when I saw this come before us, it felt like just a more formal policy in the same way we were talking about the employee handbook or something like that.
Yeah, so I don't view this policy as controversial at all. I think that those who commented earlier, I would encourage you to read the policy, and if you still feel it's controversial, I'd really like to hear your opinions after that. I do understand why a decision relating to Sally's remote attendance is contentious, and I think that's an entirely separate issue that we should decide and discuss if this policy is adopted with the whole board, like Jordan said. But this policy that's proposed tonight, I only see that as giving us the ability to make that decision. Without it, it's really just up to Sally, whether she feels like, she wants to stay on the board or not. We don't really have a basis for removing her unless her residency changes, is my understanding. Jeff?
I guess I'm a numbers guy. And one thing is, and again, it's like you said, case by case basis, but I guess I'd be interested to find out putting more of maybe a timeline or a number of meetings, or I don't know, I guess I'm just wrapping my head around that, but agree that this is more of a setting the ability to actually ask someone to leave the board for remote attendance versus dealing with this specific case with Mayor Pro Tem Barney currently.
Yeah, so I just want to distinguish again that this isn't a decision about Sally's ability to stay on the board. Look at and in terms of numbers, the way that I read this, and Clayton, please correct me if I'm wrong. It says the member who desires to participate by telephone or electronically provides notice of his or her desire to participate in that way to the town clerk sufficiently in advance of the meeting so that the town can provide the means necessary. The member may participate if the members and all parties with a legal interest are allowed to speak, a record is adequately preserved, and the remote participation doesn't affect the orderly manner. And it goes on to say, if a member requests and receives approval to participate in a certain meeting by telephone or electronically, the member is also expected to participate at other meetings that are scheduled during the member's absence. So it's case by case, where if someone requests remote participation, we make that decision based on the scope of the request, and the board can decide to deny it or conditionally approve it or anything else like we do with any other decision of the board. So all of the other provisions that apply to being a member of the board still apply. So we still have a rule that says if you miss 3 meetings in a row, that's grounds for removal. We have all the same residency grounds for removal and other things like that. And this doesn't change that. Have I said anything incorrect or confusing, Clayton or Gloria?
No, I don't think so. I would iterate that this is the remote attendance policy, again, like you said, Mayor Furman, it doesn't have to do with residency or, at this point, it really is a way for the board as a whole to determine on a case-by-case basis what they want for their attendance. I mean, you guys, this is just a draft based on a request, and that's why it's in front of you as legislators now to figure out if this is something generic. It's very general in nature and gives a lot of power to the board as a whole without a lot of finite exceptions and exemptions. As an example, Trustee Davis mentioned, there's no numbers. There are policies out there that say, like you stated, if you miss three meetings in a row, or you can't attend more than 6 meetings remotely in a year, or whatever the case may be. The problem with those is that all those got blown out of the water when COVID hit. And now even the state legislature is allowing quasi-judicial hearings through remote attendance, as long as these certain, basic level of requirements are met. And that's why it looks like a very simple policy, but it meets all the basic necessary requirements for a meeting, even a quasi-judicial matter, wherein as long as everybody can participate in a way that isn't distracting and that doesn't take away from the process or the substantive requirements of whatever that open meeting or hearing is, that remote participation now is something that has been kind of streamlined, even to the point where there's remote participation in civil and criminal litigation. And so you just have to determine as a board where you want to go with it. This is a very board-centric policy that allows the board to determine on a case-by-case basis, which is very flexible and allows discussion in all sorts of different circumstances, wherein, I think if you start adding different numbers in, now absences is totally a different thing. If somebody's just not showing up. And of course you can require residency, and we can talk about that more if you'd like. You can require a amount of participation, like actually making meetings. But if you want to allow remote attendance, I think this is a good way to give the board teeth to decide whether or not, certain circumstances worthy of allowing remote attendance.
Have you seen any remote attendance policies that specify the location of the remote attendance? So for example, Jeff and Gloria are in Silverton remote attending, as opposed to, we've had meetings where trustees participated from other countries.
Sure. No, I have not seen anything. I think the idea of the remote attendance is that if the person's not in the room, then they're not there, right? So whether they're in the next room or in another country, that's what technology can do for us, is they can put them as good as it can be without actually being in the room. So I've yet to come across, and I've read a lot of them, a single remote attendance policy that requires that the remote attendance be in a certain location. It just requires, again, those basic guidelines that their participation remotely doesn't undermine or interfere with the process or substantive requirements of either the meeting or the hearing or whatever, the circumstances, and that everybody can hear, and if need be, see. Seeing is very important too, because you can gauge a lot by a person's body language and demeanor. You don't lose that really with remote attendance. Of course, face-to-face is always best, but we've realized now over the last couple of years that that's just probably going to be an ongoing thing. We have a different version of COVID every time I turn on the news, and people get it. And there's certain people that are very, and there's other illnesses as well. I mean, there's so many different aspects to it. But I don't think if you allow remote attendance, that determining the location of that remote attendance would be reasonable in any stretch. I just can't see a situation where they have to be in a certain location. That doesn't mean, now I think that gets more into the gray area of residency again, which probably needs, might be a different discussion, or you might want to hear some on that on this discussion. But residency does have to do with location, but it has to do a lot with, some other factors. So I think as long as they're still a resident and meet the code requirements, if you want to adopt a remote attendance policy, I would not deal with the location of the remote attendance. I think you're kind of dipping your toes in, the wrong pool there.
Can I ask you a leading question?
Please.
Can you confirm that nothing in this policy changes the requirements for a trustee in terms of being eligible to be or continue to be a trustee on this board?
Yes, there's nothing that touches on the code requirements of being and the main ones are being a resident, correct? I mean, and how long you've been there, and I looked at the different. Let me go down that page. So in your code, the qualifications are that the trustee shall be a resident of the town and a qualified elector. And then, there's requirements within the statute that kind of outline that. And then it talks about moving or becoming during the term a non-resident. And again, that now we're getting to the residency thing. And none of this remote attendance touches on the residency and or changes that part of the code and or the statute. I think obviously if somebody came to you and said, hey, I would like to remote attend for 2 years, I'm going to be traveling to, a different country or different state, it would obviously trigger some sort of discussion or, informal investigation as to whether or not that person's residency is changing based on that request. But the request itself for remote attendance and the policy itself does not change any of the requirements of the code.
Thank you. So in my view, this provides clarity and guidelines around remote attendance for the board. I don't see this as controversial. I'm comfortable making this decision tonight, but I would also caution anybody that if you're not comfortable making this decision tonight, and we really want Jim and Tyler to be involved in this discussion because you do feel like it's something other than administrative or other than clarifying, I'd recommend that you go that direction, because if any one of you aren't comfortable voting, then we don't have a quorum and we should table this for the next meeting.
I'm totally comfortable voting on this, and I was more alluding to it of making sure that everyone is here when we do decide whatever it is on a case-by-case basis. And I think it's beneficial to decide on a case-by-case basis. I'm not trying to throw Jeff under the bus, but he was on Zoom for a while going back, helping his brother out. And, to me, that would have been a case right there of can I remotely attend while I'm doing X, Y, and Z? That's when the whole board should decide together and figure out whether that's an acceptable thing or, does it change residency? This just provides us the framework of having that discussion. So I'm more than happy to vote on this tonight.
I think I agree with Jordan. I think that this is a administrative policy and really spells out for the community that we do have a policy in place. So it's not just loosey-goosey, because like Shane was saying earlier, if we don't have a policy in place, there's no framework for any kind of board discussion or approval or conversation about it. So I think having a policy in place actually brings more accountability and transparency to decide on a case-by-case basis. So I feel comfortable voting on this. And, like you said, Jordan, I had to be gone for the month of June, visiting family, going on trips. I was able to attend at various hours of the time zone. Jeff, it allows us those exceptions and makes it more formal if we're supporting someone who needs to care for a family member or someone's home with COVID, or it creates a framework for something formal that gives us the ability to, decide.
I think it lets us be more flexible and inclusive too, depending on the situation. Because like you said, it could be taking care of a family member. You could be a service member in the Army. You could have any reason. And if you just put an arbitrary number on that, you can only do 3 times a year, then you're kind of digging yourself a hole and excluding people that, may not need to be excluded.
Yeah. And I think this community has a variety of unique circumstances, right? Folks that work really hard 10 months of the year might be gone for a month in November because that's the only time they get a vacation. And if they were able to still participate in 2 meetings that they would miss, I think we need to allow for some of that flexibility, but I really think for the community to know that there was no policy in place, this is actually making a policy so that we have a framework. I think there may be differences of opinions out there, but this really gives more transparency and accountability than we had before, from my perspective.
Yes, Jeff, do you have anything to add or say, or are we good to decide one way or another?
No, I'm definitely on, I feel comfortable voting, and I think fills a good gap for, as Dana pretty much called me out, taking care of family members and being homesick with COVID. That's been my summer. So, yeah, I think I support us moving forward.
Are we taking questions or comment?
Sure.
We use field list, speaking.
So the way that we're supposed to do it is at the beginning of the meeting, so you want to make public comment on a thing in the middle, but if we're still getting there, so please go ahead.
I'm Kelly Freeze. I'm just asking, I want to know, how can we let somebody go out of the country for a year, still pay them, but explain this to the community. Why do we want to still pay them if they're going out of the country? I understand using Zoom for, like, if you have a family member that's sick or you have COVID yourself. It seems like now that COVID has hit, it's just being used more as a crutch to get everybody out of this room. We all know Shane doesn't even live here in town, that we get Zoom from you all the time down in Durango. Not everybody's here in the room anymore. And I just want to know why we're trying to use Zoom as a crutch. And yeah, I can understand if you have a medical problem, yeah, go ahead. But if you're going to be gone for a year like Sally, or not even in the town here, why are we letting them use Zoom is what I want to know as a community member.
So I think that's an important clarification, that we're not discussing any specific circumstances right now. And that's why everybody's comfortable making that decision, it sounds like, tonight. This isn't a conversation about allowing Sally, under the circumstances that definitely are going to need clarification, because there's a lot of misinformation, it sounds like. And also myself, there's clearly misinformation, but that's not the discussion tonight. The discussion is about creating a policy that creates a framework around remote participation. It's not about permitting any particular circumstances for specific trustees at this meeting tonight. Is that helpful clarification?
There's no dubious intent here. The thing being discussed.
Like there's dubious intent here about letting her go for a year. She needs to resign and let somebody else take the position.
We're not having that discussion tonight.
Let somebody else take your position.
Okay.
I think actually kind of what Molly brought up in her public comment is why we need a policy like that. She mentioned that she wasn't living in town for the last month, and we didn't have a policy to have that discussion at all. So again, that's just like creating this framework of where we can say, do we all agree that Sally can miss this time? And having this will allow us to have that discussion. So we don't have this, then as long as the trustee or whoever it is sees that they're fit to continue serving in that process and still hit all the requirements.
Well, how could she serve as a trustee when she's not even?
We're not having that conversation tonight, is what everybody here is trying to say. That's not the discussion.
And we can't have that discussion unless we have a framework to establish that as a discussion.
Yeah, that will be a different meeting and at a different time. And that's when the substance of that will come to light.
There's no way for us to even have that conversation if there's not a policy in place, to Jordan's point. If there's no policy in place, the board can't even really have that discussion. So by approving a policy now, it opens the door to have the discussion.
Doesn't that require a public hearing? The question for Clayton.
Well, public hearing triggers, like whether it's a quasi judicial matter. In this case, it wouldn't be affecting anybody's personal rights. I don't think that it has to be a public hearing in the quasi judicial sense. It will be on public record, and you can allow for public comment, of course. But a hearing versus a public meeting are very distinguishable things. What I will say is that the discussion keeps crossing over two very distinct lines between residency and remote attendance policy. For example, if there were no remote attendance policy one way or the other, and this could go either way depending on what the board decides. then somebody could just start attending remotely and there's nothing really you could do to say that they couldn't. And so if somebody, and of course, if they're gone for a long period of time and they don't tell you where they're at, or they're just saying, I'm just going to, appear remotely. And the only thing you have at that point is based on the code is to determine that that person is not a resident. And that's very difficult to do, very difficult. And I can explain that, again, whenever you want, here, now, later, whenever you guys want to have that discussion. But residency in Colorado is not as simple as a, Webster dictionary definition of where you reside. There's case law, there's statutes, and it's not what you would look at. It's not what in my opinion, it's not something that's common sense, because it is kind of an odd statute, an odd determination on what residency means. So, we're talking about apples and oranges. When you talk about this remote attendance policy, it gives the board the authority to say, nope, you cannot attend remotely. Thus, those absences will be considered missing. And then you can, have somebody removed for not participating, versus now you'd have to go to a residency sort of determination, which is, exposes the town in multiple ways based on Colorado's residency laws and requirements. So I think, we're crossing over lines. I'm hearing some, I'm not responding or arguing with any public comment, but the residency determination will have to be made. If somebody's requesting, remote attendance for a year, which I'm not even sure if that's what's happening, but just as an example, then there's going to have to be a discussion on that. And right now, if there wasn't this remote attendance policy, if you don't pass it, which is fine, that's up to the board. But if you don't have a remote attendance policy, then now you're left with residency alone versus the board determining whether or not somebody can continue to participate remotely. And I'll tell you right now that that's not a position you want to be in if you want to stop somebody from participating remotely based on, a number of circumstances. So, I think, the apple here is, do you want a remote attendance policy, and do you want the board to be able to determine to allow those, and then the orange is, at what point does residency come into question when you're making that determination? And I think they're completely independent of each other. And I don't think this policy, conflicts anywhere with statute or with local code. But, down the road, there's going to be some hard decisions to make, but I don't think that the residency discussion has anything to do with the remote attendance policy adoption. I hope that makes sense.
Thank you. And I think because I opened up public comment, we now have 2 hands on Zoom, that it would be inappropriate for us to not take all public comments. So if we could promote Gilbert, and then after that, Jesse to speak, we'll still have the same 3-minute limitation that we normally have during our open and closing public comment.
Public comment for this.
Can you hear me?
Well,
Okay.
Yes, we can. Please go ahead.
Yeah, I had to leave for a few minutes, and I'm at my home right now, but I would just like to make a couple comments. One, there is a policy in effect right now. The policy states that if you miss 3 meetings, you cannot stay on the board. Through all this time, people have missed more than 3 meetings, and it's been accepted just by using common sense. The wheel doesn't have to be reinvented. All we're trying to do is say, there's a code in existence, use the code. And if you want to change policy, why does everybody wait till the clock's ready to strike 12 before this starts to happen? There's a code in place, follow the code. There's a policy in place. And anybody that ran for that position should know that there is all that there, and just go with the procedure. And if they want to start a remote policy, then it should be done in steps. And I do understand it doesn't have to be a public hearing, but at the same time, if you're doing this, there's nothing wrong with having a public hearing and getting public involvement. That's the idea of having board members and the community working together, is to be able to communicate with each other. I don't feel nobody's trying to hide anything. We just need to get to this process, and we need to quit waiting for the clock to strike 12 before we start moving. Again, thank you for your time.
Thank you. And then we have Jesse, and then we can go after Jesse.
Sorry, it took me a moment to join as a panelist and become unmuted. Can you all hear me now?
We can.
Okay. I just wanted to mention that it's something that Kelly brought up, even though she was kind of off topic, as you all mentioned, is really important. And that is, how does the town pay someone if they're not in Silverton? And I think not having a remote policy opens the town up for additional liability. From the perspective, I'm not an attorney, but I do work in this space. I work for a global corporation, and I help develop our remote attendance policy for that company. And what makes this complex is that in every country, residency requirements are different. In every country, taxing requirements are different. And without a policy in place that allows the administrative umbrella to review where someone is going to be for a meeting, there is no onus on that person to disclose where they're going to be. And it opens the board up for liability. So if someone does go, say, to Australia for 3 months and join meetings remotely, and the board doesn't know that, and they're subject to taxes for their small stipend in Australia, that's a problem, right? So I think it's something that would be remiss is for the board not to have a policy like this. Every company in the world that was worth their salt developed a policy like this at the start of the pandemic for exactly that reason, for the exact reason that Shane is mentioning, which is you have to have some framework within which to evaluate people's Zoom attendance, and you don't have that right now. So I do agree that there is two separate issues. One issue is, should you have a policy? And as a member of the public, I say, yes, I would really like our board to have a policy so that we can operate with excellence and not be kind of running around like crazy people, being retroactive and not proactive in our approach. And then the second issue is completely separate, which is whether someone under that remote policy should be allowed to attend remotely. Two separate issues.
Thank you. Yeah, Kevin.
Okay. My name's Kevin Baldwin. I'm a resident of Silverton as well as a business owner. I have a few things to say. I used to work in government for RTD, the bus company in Denver. I did that over 20 years. I was responsible for departments. We had budgets. I'm sick and tired of hearing about grants. Budget your money, save up for the project, and spend it on the project. If an emergency comes up, you may have to reorder and reprioritize the project you have so that you can afford to do what you're doing. I'm tired of the way you shovel these things around. I've heard that potty park or Columbine Park restroom is going to cost us $900,000. There's a lot of us who are in construction and are wondering, where in the world are you spending $900,000 on a bathroom? That does not make sense. Two, face-to-face. No more of this Zoom. You are getting a lot more impression from me now because of my being up to you face-to-face. From these people on the screen, so what? Anybody can hide behind a computer and throw out bombs and say things that are mean or cruel to somebody else. When you're face-to-face, you have to deal with the person. It's different. Keep it that way. The reason you are not allowed to miss more than 3 meetings is you're supposed to be here face-to-face. Even the federal government works that way. They take attendance in the Capitol building, and when they come back to their jurisdiction and their state, they're held accountable for it. We continue to expect you to be held accountable to us as a community. Silverton is a small community. There's no reason you can't be here year-round if you choose to do this. Sally, I've heard rumor that her sabbatical is involuntary. Has the board done any due diligence to see if that is true? I do not know, but I recommend that you do that. 2, she is the pro tem mayor. if something happens to you, Mayor Furman, how is she going to do anything being 4,000 miles away from here? She cannot. She is physically absent. That is why she should not allow to be to retain her position as pro tem. You, Mayor, I walk by your house daily. You know I only live half a block away from you. Your alley house and your house are like a revolving door. I've seen at least 3 tenant changes the last year in those houses, which tells me you are not a resident here. We have also sit and watched at breakfast somebody get in your Toyota Land Cruiser or that VW Passat and move it from the Highlander building to your house or to the Wyman. This is corruption. Finally, I'm gonna pick on Trustee Burma. Apparently you didn't learn your lesson from the Pledge of Allegiance outbreak last year, whenever it was. I watched you immediately leave the room before the Pledge of Allegiance, and then when it was done, you came back immediately afterward. You are a coward. You are not a man of good character to deserve to be the position you have. Thank you for your time.
I'd like to clarify that the public comment was intended to be related specifically to that agenda item. That public comment is on the record, but would more appropriately have been during our closing public comment. That may have been my mistake.
I'm sorry, I didn't.
Nope, you're all good. You're all good. It's on the record, so it's in there. Okay, back to the conversation at hand. Sounds like we still have a decent amount of public clarification to do around this, but it sounds like the 4 of us and staff and our attorney are all on the same page. Would someone like to make a motion or have further discussion?
Yeah, I can make a motion to approve resolution 2022-13 remote. Adopting the resolution, or sorry, let me restart with that. I'm going to make a motion to adopt resolution 2022-13, a resolution adopting a remote attendance policy to provide terms and conditions for limited telephone and electronic participation by members of the Board of Trustees at regular and special meetings.
I'll second.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Trustee Davis. Yes.
Trustee Grant.
Yes.
Trustee Harper is absent. Trustee Garrett.
Yes.
Trustee George is absent. Mayor Barnes has recused himself. Mayor Furman. Yes. Motion passes 4 days, 1 recusal. Thank you. And that, Sally. And then we'll move on to our last agenda item. Sally, you're good. All right, we are moving on to continued business 9C, update on Columbine Park finances and build schedule.
And so Todd and I prepared a memo to update you on Columbine Park. Todd is the lead on this project. I am a lead on the financials portion of it. Basically, we are set to receive the final engineering plans this week, and the foundation work will start this week. We are locked in at that 4.35% interest rate and are set to close on August 4th with the first payments to the contractors to be approved at our next trustee meeting. And Todd is available as well if you have any questions.
Any questions about Columbine Park?
Is it accurate to say that as we get the final engineered documents that we will then rebid the contract with the contractor, or do we have a signed contract?
No, that is correct. So as soon as we get the final construction ready documents, we will be able to rebid everything and then finalize our contract. We do have a draft contract written right now with 9318, and we are waiting for that final bid.
Thank you.
Okie dokie. So we'll now move to our closing public comment. We'll first start with anyone in person. Kelly, would you like to?
One more.
Okay.
My last one is to Gloria and to Matt. I would like to know, Since when I was a town clerk and deputy clerk, we always had to have the meeting minutes and agendas online for everybody to see. I looked on there, there's nothing. And I want to know why we don't have transparency here.
We do have minutes posted through the YouTube. Those are always available to see so you can get everybody's.
No, I always had I had to have the typed minutes online.
This is supposed to be like a public comment, a one-way
I
thing.
just want to know why
You can clarify and respond to things following, but during the public comments, Kelly's 3 minutes.
I just want to know why they're not on there for the public to see, because I always had to have them on there. And it just seems like it's being non-transparent. So. Thank you.
Thank you. We can now move to online comments. If anyone on Zoom would like to make a comment, please click the raise hand button. If we could please promote Jesse to panelist.
Hello again. I wanted to make a comment on the staff report regarding the Planning Commission. We are, my husband and I are the applicants that Gloria mentioned in her staff report. And it is my impression from the process that there is an opportunity for the town to make the process more transparent and clear for the average citizen who is applying to improve their home in the historic district. There are a number of homeowners now in the historic overlay district that are not necessarily business owners. And the process can be very long. It can be very confusing. And the most concerning part of the process to me was that I felt, you know, I have the deepest respect for those serving on our architectural committee, but I did feel that the architectural committee was not taking the position of what is it that these people are proposing relative to what are the rules. They were having a discussion about what they personally do and don't like. And I feel like that's detrimental for our town. We have a lot of buildings in town that are in need of improvement. We have a lot of boarded up structures. We have vacant structures. If it is a priority for the town to have clearer processes, and if it is a priority for the town to allow for year-round tourism and development, that this process needs to be made clearer and more straightforward. I think it's fantastic, the history we have in Silverton. We as applicants did our best to create a building look in our application that sits with the many documents available that conflict and abides by them. But the conditions that we were passed with 6 conditions. We're grateful to be allowed to begin work on our project. But the 6 conditions, I think of those, 4 of them, I was very surprised to hear that the Architectural Review Committee felt they had the jurisdiction to make those conditions at all, including things like, you know, where we store things on our property. Like, you know, I guess whoever owned our property before had, and this is just a random example, had a hoarding phase and put a lot of their personal items in the sidewalk. To me, that seems like a code enforcement issue, not something that needed to be discussed at the Architectural Committee by new owners who weren't involved in that process for a long time. So again, deepest respect for that group. But I think, you know, if we have some staff members who can help that committee understand what they do and do not have a place to adjudicate upon, I think that would be helpful for the average citizen. So again, I know that's not an agenda item really, but I didn't know where else to bring the concern. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. I'd like to make a quick public comment. We've been here before in terms of conflict with the community, and I'm really proud of this board, and I'm really proud of the work that we've all done. Really proud of the staff. We're in a much better place than we were 2 years ago as a community, I think. There's a good amount of misinformation and rumor mill happening, and the thing that I've found to be the most helpful is doing the right thing under the circumstances every time. You're never going to regret that. So just keep doing the right thing. there's angry, loud voices that often are justified if the reasons that they're angry were true, but they haven't done the research to or had the conversation directly to know what the real context is. So I would encourage the community to come talk to us if you think things are going on that you're unhappy with, and to learn as much as you can before making people feel, as I'm sure members of this board feel tonight after the comments we've been subjected to. But I'm really proud of everybody, and I'm really proud of the work this whole community is doing. Thank you. Seeing no other public comments at this time, we'll close public comment and adjourn the meeting. It is 8:56 p.m. Thank you, everybody. Have a good night.